Hey folks, this is App Shaker. This is the fourth video on WatchKit App Programming with Swift. Furthermore, this is the second episode on how to program a guessing game with WatchKit. Today, we're going to continue with our guessing game and we will add the following elements and mechanisms to it. First, we will add a timer. This timer will count down from 20 to 0 so that our player has to hurry up in order to guess the correct place where the world's tallest church is located. Moreover, we will add a label displaying a text saying hurry up. And if the timer counts down to 0, the label will display another text, namely you were too slow. And last, we will add 4 buttons so that the user has to decide which city is the place where the world's tallest church is located. As a result, let's just start right away where we left the last time. So, I hope you remember that we left where we had 2 interface controllers, namely our first interface controller here and the second interface controller here. So, let's just move on to our second interface controller and let's just add the elements and the mechanisms to the second interface controller. As I told you previously, we need to have a label for our second interface controller. Let's just place one there. Here, so you see here is one. Let's just put it here. And let's just assume that we want to write down something like hurry up. Okay, so the user already knows that he has to be fast in order to select the correct city later on. Furthermore, what you're going to learn today is we're going to play something that is called a timer. So you see down here that we have something that is called a timer, and the timer counts up or down to a specified time. The displayed string can be customized with different units and formats. So let's just drag and drop it here onto our second interface controller. So let's just make it a little bigger. So for you it may be a little difficult to see what I'm doing right now, but I'm just trying to extend the width of the timer. Just do it here. Okay, and so now we're good to go to our interface controller. Namely, let's just click here on a tuxedo, and here we are in our second interface controller where we can also place some code here. Okay, so as you remember, if you want to work with UI elements, then you have to hook them up with your interface controller class or to any other class you're working with them. So let's just hook up this label and this timer up with our second interface controller. So let's just click on control, place it here. Let's just call it hurry up label. Let's just leave some space here so that you can see it better. And the same holds true for our timer. Let's just call this here the timer. Okay, so now we have our 2 UI elements. Let's just compile it and let's just take a look at it, what it looks like. Takes a little, as you remember, to launch our iOS simulator and our WatchKit simulator completely. So you remember when you click on the play game, the second interface controller should be displayed with a modal view controller. Very good. So you see now we have here our hurry up label and we have our timer. But as you can see, our timer doesn't do anything up to now because we haven't decided to implement some logic for this timer. Up to now we just see that everything is set to 0. So in order to change that, let's just stop this application here and let's just implement some logic to it. So first of all, what you have to know is that a timer needs to work with some parameters or with other variables. For instance, in order to use this timer here, you have to have something that makes sure that we actually use time interval, meaning the timer has to know how much time should be taken into consideration. Meaning, for instance, as I told you previously, we want our user to have only 20 seconds to guess the correct city where the world's tallest church is located. So, as a result, we need to use something that's called NS time interval. And let me just write down the variable for this here. So you have something that's called var, and we need to have a name for our variable. Let's just call it the duration, and it's of type NS time interval. So as you can see, NS time interval is used to specify time interval in seconds. So as a result, what we have to do is just use the equal sign and write down 20 for 20 seconds. Furthermore, what we also need is called a timer that is also responsible for making sure that when something is done at a certain time, then something else should be done. Meaning, when we count down from 20, 19, 18, 17, and so on to 0, then when we get to 0, we need to do something else. So, and as a result, we need a second timer to make sure that when we get to 0, then some other function is called. That's the reason why now we also write down something that's called the done timer. Okay, and this one is also of type NS timer. Let's just also place a question mark here. Remember, question mark means that this is here optional, meaning that you can work with a NS timer or you can work with a null value coming in. That also depends on how you're going to work or continue with this template for your guessing game in the future. So that's the reason why I'm leaving this optional to you. But for this tutorial here, this will work perfectly fine. Good, so now we have our variables set. Now let's just go down here and place some functionality. So as I told you, we need to have a function that is called, let's just call it start our timer. And we don't have any other parameters, and we just need to use it this way. Good. So now remember, here this function is called when we open up our second interface controller, meaning when we clicked on play the game, we call the model view controller, which contains our interface, our second interface controller, and then this method, this function here should be called, and then the timer should also count down from 20 to 0. So let's just do it this way. So remember, we have our timer, which is this here, this variable. Okay, let's just use this here, the timer. So this timer also has a property that is a date. Okay, because this date property is also very important. Let's just check it out. Hang on, let's just check it out here. Jump to definition. Set date. So you see here it has a function that's called set date, count up down from current date to this date. So this is what we need here, and as you can see, it also requires a parameter which is of type and its date. So let's just give it a date, and within that date we use something that we have previously implemented in this class, which is our time interval, meaning we need to use this here, the duration variable, because this is the value we're going to need in order to count down from 20 to 0. So, and furthermore, we also have to declare that, let me just close this here a little so that you can see it better. So yeah, you need something that is called time interval since now. So, and now you place the interval, meaning the 20 seconds up here. Okay, so let me just check whether the parentheses are correctly set. So now this is good. Okay, so now we have set our timer, so it has its value. So that means that we have our timer, we set a date, and it's of type and is date, and we say that it should count down from now, meaning from the moment when we initiate our second interface controller. The timer should count down with this interval. And what is our interval? 20. Very good. However, what is still missing here is you also have to tell the timer that it should start counting down, meaning you have to write down the timer dot start. So now when you call this function here, the timer, our timer variable, is set with the correct duration and it will start counting. Very good. However, furthermore, remember I also told you that we also need to have a second timer in order to make sure that when we get to 0 we also do something. So let's just copy paste it here, and we just say that our timer is timer scheduled, this one here. Let me just close this here a little, and let's just go back to our source code because this is easier for you to follow. Hang on. So now you can see it there. So let me just also place it up here. In this case, this timer also needs to have some parameters. Here we need something that is of type and is time interval. Remember, we already have something here, which is this here, the duration. Let's just put it here. Then it also asks for an object. So where should this timer also be executed, meaning which object should it work with? So in this case, with this object means the second interface controller, so I just call it self here. And we also have something that is called selector. So a selector is really important here because this selector is basically the mechanism in order to call a separate function, so that when this timer gets to 0, then a function should be called in order to execute some other logic. Here in this case, what you have to write down is selector. And very important here, you have to write down the name of the function you will use later on. So up to now we haven't implemented any other function, but we will do this in just a minute. However, bear in mind that the way how you write down the name of this function here is very important, because if it does not match here with the future one, then this timer here will not be able to call your function. So, and for this purpose, we're going to call our function timer fired function. And we close inverted commas. And do we need any other object for our user info? Actually, we don't need anything because we're not going to work with any other object. And repeats false because we don't want this to be repeated. Good. So up to now, everything is fine. So let me just double check if there is anything missing. Yeah, here you have to close this parenthesis here too. Very good. Now we have everything done for this function here, but as I told you, we also need a different function for this selector here. So let me just copy paste this here and write down a func timer fired function. It also has no parameters, and here we're going to do something, namely, remember, let me just go back to our interface storyboard and to our code. So remember, here we have our label that is currently set with a string that is called hurry up. So what we want to do here is when we get to 0, meaning that the user has not guessed the correct city where the world's tallest church is located, then we want some other text to be displayed within this label. And how do we do this? Simply remember, we have previously created a variable for this label here, and it's called the hurry up label. Let me just use this here and just set the text to something like "you were too slow." Yeah, and that's basically it. Let's just check out what it looks like. Click on play. It is built, and now we can see what it looks like. Remember, play the game, and now nothing. This is also important to check out why it does not work here. Now, as you can see, it didn't work because we forgot to do something, obviously, because remember, we did everything correctly regarding the functions, because we set our timer, our interval, our second timer, and also we set the text for our label. However, we forgot something very basic, so you have to make sure that the actual function is called where the overall object is initiated. So in this case, here in our awake with context method, we also have to place the code for calling our timer. So in this case, we need to call this function here, because this is the place where the music plays. So let's just place it here. Remember, in Swift you call a function this way here, and let's just run it again, and let us just check out what it looks like now. So play the game, and voila, it works perfectly. So you see, now it's counting down from 20 to 0. So let's just check out what happens when we get to 0. So 3, 2, 1, 0, and yeah, it worked correctly. So you see, we changed the string of this label from hurry up to you were too slow, so it worked correctly. So as you can see, we can work with a timer, but up to now, obviously, you see that we don't have any options for our user. So for a guessing game, you have to give your player some options to choose from, meaning you need to have a set of cities or places where the world's tallest church could be located. So up to now, we don't have anything like that. So we have to give our player these options. And in this tutorial, we're going to do this via using buttons. So let us just add some buttons here. Let's just close our application here. Let's just go back to this area where we can select our button. So let me just look for button. Yeah, very good. So let me just close this here. So let us just add some buttons down here. This is easier. So the first button, let's just call it New York. Second button, let's just call it Ulm. Here, our third button, let's just call it London. And now we're gonna run into a problem, meaning that the buttons are really big. So let's just make them a little slimmer so that we can also place a fourth button down here. And there you go. So we can place this here. Let us just implement New Delhi. And boom, so you see, we're done with our buttons. Let's just check out what they look like by running them. So let's just click on play, and you see, very, very good. Everything worked well. So we have our label here that makes our player a little nervous, meaning that he has to hurry up. We have our timer here already set, and we have our buttons here. However, up to now we haven't implemented any logic, and when we click on any button here, then we want our user to see that whether he clicked on the correct place or not, and depending on that, we want this second interface controller to be close to. However, we're not going to talk about this in this tutorial. We're going to talk about how to implement some logic for these buttons in the next tutorial. So please remember just to click on the link displayed in the right hand corner to check out the third episode on this guessing game tutorial series. And remember, thumbs up if you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to see more tutorials in the future. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and don't forget, stay tuned.